Welcome to MLOps Minutes. In this video, we'll take a look at what MLOps are. So if you've understood the previous video, what's going to happen is that today we deliver real-time APIs that expose deep learning AIs in production. These are computer programs. What happens to these computer programs is that they need to be maintained over time. For example, deliveries will have to be constantly updated. That's good practice. Python versions will have to be updated. If there's a security flaw, you're going to have to patch and reliver very quickly. What can happen is that if you don't put any practices in place, you'll have to retrain the models, and then you may no longer have the data, you may no longer have the source code, you may no longer be able to do what you need to do. As a result, you practically have to redo the project before you can release anything back into production. So what is MLOps? Basically, it's a set of best practices that will allow your projects to simply go into production. If you don't implement MLOps practices, you simply won't be able to go into production. You'll hear a lot about tools when we talk about MLOps. On LinkedIn, I get lots of messages every day from salespeople selling me tools. But in fact, MLOps isn't about tools. MLOps is all about human culture. In other words, I'm going to detail the different points here. The first extremely important point is the way we work. Often in companies X or Y, you may be siloed in departments, typically data science, data engineer, ops developer, and your objectives will just be, for example, to produce models with the best performance if you're a data scientist. In fact, operating in this way, in a siloed way, doesn't work. Why not? Because you're going to concentrate on your own little box without looking at the constraints of the boxes next to it. For it to work, you have to be organized, focused, product-oriented. So why product? Because the idea is that you make applications to deliver added value to users. And your focus, everyone's focus, should be not to do tech for tech's sake, but to meet users' needs quite simply. And being product-centric means that we can all work together, focusing on a single objective, making a product that will work in production and meet users' needs. And that's really the key. What we need to do is automate everything. And why? Because, quite simply, if it takes 3 weeks to deploy in production, then every time you make a small modification, it will take another 3 weeks to do it all. Whereas if you automate, you save 3 weeks. It's quite simple. Implement good code practices. Today, when we develop, you have to make clean code. You have to set up unit tests. Why do we do this? Because today, as a developer, we work on our subject. We can go on vacation and come back, or leave the company altogether. What's happening is that we need to be able to... The code we produce isn't our code, it's the company's code. And anyone must be able fairly quickly to get their hands on it and start debugging and modifying it. And in the event of an incident, we have to be able to quickly, if there's no one on the team, to correct it. So good code practices are essential. Good architecture practices are the same thing. You have to have a good architecture. Implement all good data practices. It's simple because if you do a training session with data and you retrain it, but you don't know where the data is, it's going to be complicated. And you also need to understand and automate the whole machine learning workflow associated with the data. The deliverable of a MLOps project, the key to understanding is not the model itself, it's not the API and the model, it's how we generate our AI. And that's the key. And to be able to automate how we generate our model, we need to be able to version the data and version the code. And in the code, there's going to be the code for how we train the model. the code for how we expose the API, the code for how we monitor our API, how we monitor drifts, and so on. So everything has to be versioned. The grail of MLOps. The grail is in one code modification or pull request, as we'll see in the following videos. Every time you modify a code, you need to be able to know whether production is capable of continuing to operate, and with a maximum of one manual action, be able to redeploy to production. And then we're all good. In other words, when I make a code modification on pre-processing, for example, I want to be able, if we take up my little triangle from earlier, from the previous videos, to be able to say, do I have good prediction quality? Do I have good response times? And are the costs acceptable? And that's not bad. Thank you for this video. And now, for the next few videos, we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty.